The mountain rarely kills in chaos. More often, it waits for calm. It waits for the moment when everything feels organized, predictable, almost safe. That is when small decisions begin to carry more weight than storms. May 7th, 2022, early morning, on Mount Everest. Altitude roughly 6,000 meters, Camp 1. The sky is clear, the wind is light, and visibility stretches cleanly across ice and rock. Sunlight reflects softly off the Khumbu icefall above, no glare, no menace. Radios are quiet. Tents sit anchored and orderly on the ice. There is no urgency in the air, no pressure to rush. This is the kind of morning climbers trust to Italy. At this altitude, the body feels capable. Breathing is work, but not a struggle. The schedule feels flexible. The mountain gives no reason to argue back. Among the climbers is a 55-year-old Russian mountaineer named Pavl Kostkin. He is not reckless. He is not inexperienced. Decades in the mountains have taught him endurance, patience, and restraint. He believes, like many seasoned climbers that experience smooth uncertainty, that danger announces itself clearly through storms, avalanches, or visible panic. Everest rarely works that way. Its most convincing trap is the illusion of margin of belief that a few extra minutes, one last adjustment, or a brief pause cannot possibly matter when everything looks stable. This is not a story about ambition or drama. It is about a quiet morning and a decision so small it barely registered as a decision at all. If you're watching Ben's stories, stay with this case. Because on Everest, the mountain does not punish boldness first. It waits for comfort. By mid-morning, Camp I begins to stir, but slowly. Movements are deliberate, economical. At 6,000 meters, no one wastes energy, yet no one feels threatened either. Oxygen is thin, but manageable. The kind of altitude where confidence grows quietly, without fanfare. Pavl has already spent days moving through this zone. He understands how his body responds here. He knows the rhythm: step, breath, pause. He is not chasing speed. He is not racing a clock. His objective is simple: continue acclimatization, conserve strength, prepare for higher camps. In Pavl's mind, patience equals safety. His role on the mountain is unremarkable by design. He is not filming himself. He is not pushing a dramatic schedule. He is methodical, calm. The kind of climber others assume will always make the sensible choice. Experience, to him, has earned flexibility. He believes he can afford small adjustments because he has learned, over decades, how to read his limits. Around him, small signals surface, not alarms, just friction. A Sherpa mentions that temperatures are rising faster than expected. Another climber notes faint cloud movement higher up on the western Khum. Nothing dangerous, nothing urgent, just information, casually exchanged and mentally filed away. Pavl hears it all and weighs it against how he feels right now. He feels fine. That internal feedback matters more than forecasts, more than second-hand caution. Years in the mountains have trained him to trust his own condition above all else. Fatigue, dizziness, confusion, those are reasons to stop. Absent those signs, progress feels justified. This logic is common on Everest, and the mountain does not challenge it immediately. As the morning continues, Pavl steps away from his tent to handle a minor task: adjusting equipment, checking a line, reorganizing supplies. Nothing strenuous, nothing risky, nothing that feels like it requires full preparation. Gloves stay off longer than planned. Supplemental oxygen remains unused. Minutes pass, the sun climbs higher. Snow softens slightly underfoot. Still no wind. Still no sense of threat. This is the moment where nothing dramatic happens. No argument, no weather shift, no visible mistake. Just a quiet extension of time. Someone asks if he's coming back to rest. Pavl gestures casually. Just a few more minutes. On Everest, a few more minutes has ended more climbs than storms ever did. As his body works at altitude, subtle changes begin, barely perceptible. Breathing deepens. Coordination dulls just enough to go unnoticed. Decision-making slows, but not enough to feel wrong. The danger is not that Pavl feels weak. The danger is that he feels normal. At 6,000 meters, normal is already compromised. By the time he turns back toward the tents, the margin he thought he had has thinned. Not disappeared, just narrowed quietly, invisibly. This is the point where turning around still solves everything, and it is also the point most climbers miss, because nothing tells them they are late. The mountain remains calm. So does Pavl. The first sign that something is wrong is not pain. It is delay. Pavl moves slower than he expects, not dramatically, just enough to notice that the tent feels farther away than it should. His breathing deepens, but it doesn't alarm him. At this altitude, heavy breathing is normal. Everything feels explainable. That is how Everest keeps its advantage. As he walks, his gloves remain clipped to his harness. He tells himself he will put them on in a moment. Dexterity still feels adequate. Fingers respond. The cold is present, but distant. The sun is still up. The light is still good. There is no internal signal demanding urgency. Yet the balance is shifting. At 6,000 meters, even small delays compound quickly. Blood oxygen levels drop. Heat loss accelerates as movement slows. The margin between fine and failing is narrow, and it closes without warning. Pavl reaches the edge of camp and pauses, not to rest, just to orient himself. The tents look the same. The ice looks the same, but the silence feels heavier. Sound doesn't carry the way it did earlier. A radio crackles faintly, then goes quiet again. This is the moment climbers sometimes describe later, not fear, but a sense of being watched, not by the mountain, but by time. Someone calls his name. The voice feels distant, stretched thin by cold air. Pavl raises a hand in response. The gesture costs more energy than it should. His arm feels heavy, not weak, heavy. That distinction matters. He tells himself he will sit for just a moment, a brief pause to steady his breathing. He lowers himself onto his pack, still upright, still alert enough to know he should not lie down. This is another small decision. Sitting is safer than pushing while tired. That logic has saved lives before. On Everest, it can also end them. Without movement, the cold begins to work more efficiently. Heat drains from his core. Fingers stiffen. The idea of putting on gloves feels complicated, done, necessarily complex. He flexes his hands instead. The motion reassures him. Minutes pass again. The clouds mentioned earlier begin to thin the light. Not darkness, just dullness. Contrast fades. Edges soften. Depth perception weakens. The world becomes flatter, quieter, less urgent. This is what hypoxia often feels like. Not panic, but calm acceptance. Inside Pavl's mind, priorities begin to rearrange themselves. Survival doesn't disappear, but it no longer feels immediate. The need to stand, to move, to act now loses its sharpness. From the outside, nothing looks dramatic. He is upright, responsive, alive. But the mountain has already taken something essential. It has taken his sense of timing. At this point, intervention would still work. Warmth, movement, oxygen. Any of these could reverse what's happening. But Everest does not announce when help is urgently required. It simply waits to see whether the climber will ask for it. Pavl does not. And in that silence, the final window begins to close. When help finally comes, it does not arrive urgently. At Camp 1, urgency is reserved for obvious emergencies: falls, visible injuries, sudden storms. Pavl's situation does not look like any of those. He is conscious. He responds when spoken to. He is sitting upright, doing exactly what climbers are taught to do when they feel taxed. From a distance, he appears to be resting. This is why Everest is dangerous, even in plain sight. A Sherpa approaches and notices the stillness. Not dramatic stillness, just a lack of transition. Pavl has not stood up again. His posture hasn't changed. His movements are slow, careful, economical, to the point of near absence. The Sherpa speaks to him. Pavl answers, but the responses arrive late, slightly misaligned with the questions. His voice is calm. To calm, there is no fear in it. That absence becomes the warning. Oxygen is suggested. Pavl does not refuse. He hesitates, not in resistance, but in confusion. He nods eventually. The mask is brought closer. The process takes longer than it should. Straps feel unfamiliar. Buckles require focus. Each step in the routine becomes its own task. At lower altitude, this would be irritating. Here, it is lethal. The clouds thicken slightly. Light dulls further. The temperature drops without announcement. The wind remains light, which makes everything more deceptive. There is no dramatic weather shift to blame, no visible enemy. Pavl's body begins shutting down non-essential functions. Fine motor control fades. Heat is conserved in the core at the expense of extremities. Awareness narrows not into panic, but into simplicity. Sit, breathe, stay. That instinct has helped humans survive for millennia. On Everest, it often does the opposite. Attempts are made to get him moving. Standing proves difficult, not impossible, just unreasonably demanding. His legs respond slowly, as if permission must be requested first. When he does rise, balance wavers. The effort costs more than it returns. He is seated again. This is the moment where the mountain wins not through force, but through patience. Time passes, speech slows, responses shorten, then stop altogether. The oxygen mask remains nearby, unused only centimeters from usefulness. Equipment is present, knowledge is present. Experience surrounds him. What is missing is timing. By the time it becomes clear that Pavl is no longer just resting, the options have narrowed. Evacuation at this altitude is slow, even in perfect conditions. A body that has become cold-soaked and hypoxic does not restart easily. Camp 1, designed for safety, becomes the place where motion ends. Pavl Kostkin dies there, at roughly 6,000 meters, on May 7, 2022, not during a summit push, not in a storm, not alone. He dies in a place meant for recovery. Later, when others pass through the area, one detail lingers longer than explanations ever will. His gear remains orderly, nothing scattered, nothing torn. Gloves still clipped where they were meant to be. The mountain did not interrupt him. It simply waited for him to stop interrupting himself. In the days that follow, the mountain returns to routine with unsettling speed. Climbers move through Camp 1 again. Lines are checked. Loads are carried upward. Radios resume their clipped, practical chatter. Pavl's death becomes a fact to be logged, not a disruption to be processed. On Everest, continuation is not cruelty, it is necessity. Those who were nearby replay the timeline quietly, not out loud, not an accusation, just fragments. He looked fine. He said he only needed a minute. We thought he was resting. Each statement is accurate. None of them explains the outcome on its own. What stands out, when the story is told later, is how little actually went wrong. No rule was clearly broken. No reckless gamble was taken. Pavl did not push upward when he should have turned around. He did not ignore a storm. He did not chase glory. He simply stayed at altitude. And staying is rarely neutral. Medical analysis would later point to hypoxia, cold exposure, and delayed intervention. All correct? All incomplete. Because those conditions exist on Everest every day, and most days they do not end in death. What made this day different was sequence. A pause extended slightly too long. Gloves stayed off slightly too late. Movement resumed slightly too slowly. Each decision, taken alone, was reasonable. Together, they formed a trap. This pattern repeats across Everest's history with quiet consistency. Not the bold mistake, but the comfortable one. Not panic, but permission. The permission to wait. The belief that the body will signal clearly when danger arrives. The mountain does not work on clear signals. It works on erosion. By the time urgency is felt, urgency no longer helps. Many who reflect on Pavl's case focus on proximity. Camp 1 is not exposed, it is not remote. It is staffed, structured, familiar. That proximity creates an illusion that rescue is always seconds away, that risk is diluted by company. In reality, proximity can delay response more effectively than isolation. When danger looks obvious, climbers act. When it looks ordinary, they wait. Pavl trusted his experience. He trusted his sense of condition. He trusted that danger would feel dangerous. Everest waited for that trust to settle in. This is not a story about misfortune. It is a story about timing and how human judgment degrades quietly, especially when surrounded by competence, equipment, and routine. Pavl's death does not stand alone. It belongs to a long line of cases where the mountain never raised its voice. It simply allowed the climber to believe that nothing urgent was happening. Across decades of Everest history, one pattern repeats with unsettling consistency. The fatal moment rarely feels fatal. It feels reasonable, calm, often responsible. The climber sits instead of pushes, waits instead of acts, trusts instead of checks. Nothing collapses. Nothing demands attention until attention no longer matters. The lesson Everest teaches is not about arrogance or ambition. It is about timing, and how easily humans surrender it when the environment appears stable. Comfort on the mountain is not a reward. It is a warning disguised as relief. Pavl Kostkin did not die because he lacked strength. He did not die because he lacked knowledge. He died because the margin between safe enough and too late is thinner than human intuition can measure. On Everest, the body does not always announce failure. The mind does not always recognize delay as risk. Experience, instead of sharpening judgment, can soften urgency. It tells you that you have been here before, that you know this feeling, that you can afford a moment. The mountain waits for that thought. When climbers imagine danger, they picture violence, wind tearing at fabric, storms screaming through ridges, bodies falling through space. But Everest's most consistent victories come from stillness, from pauses that feel earned, from confidence built slowly and rationally over years of survival. Pavl's story ends quietly. No summit photo, no final transmission. Just a set of orderly gear at a camp meant for rest. A reminder that survival on Everest is not about conquering the mountain. It is about interrupting yourself at the right moment. On Everest, reaching the summit is optional. Coming back alive is not. If you watch Ben's stories, remember this case. Share it. Talk about it. These stories are not told to shock. They are told to linger. Because on the highest mountain on Earth, the most dangerous moment is not the climb up. It is the moment a human believes they have already won.